What's up, everybody? It's Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy, and we're here. UFC 252 predictions, DFS picks, lineup advice, both FanDuel and DraftKings, Daniel Cormier, Stipe Miocic, the trilogy. It's finally here, and we're excited. In this video, we're going to take a look at some top plays. We're going to talk about high-volume fighters, some projected ownership, FanDuel and DraftKings lineup construction strategies, and then how to approach this main event between Cormier and Miocic. Before we get started, go ahead and click that subscribe button below. That way you get access to all of our latest videos as soon as they are released. Give us a thumbs up if you like this video. We'd appreciate that. Any questions you have about this slate, whether it's sports betting, whether it's your DFS lineups, who you think is going to win the fight, go ahead and comment below, and we'll get back to you before the slate starts. Now, a couple quick reminders before we jump into it. One, we will be live on Twitch Saturday afternoon. Go follow us there, twitch.tv/OccupyFantasy. Our Twitch subscribers do get access to our Discord channel. Two, we're actually running an MMA free roll series for our OccupyFantasy.com members. So the link is in the description below for more information. The link is also at the top of our MMA Occupy model. But if you're an Occupy Fantasy member, join our DraftKings League. And each Saturday from now until the start of the NFL season, it's a free contest. We're giving away DraftKings tickets to the NFL Single Game Millionaire season opener on Thursday night. All right, enough of the chit chat, enough of the intros. Let's get down to business. So, the trilogy. Let's bring up the Occupy model on screen. Remember that the Occupy model is our real-time player dashboard on OccupyFantasy.com that ranks every fighter on the slate by OF index. That is our proprietary metric. The way I like to explain it, every single video, it's a combination between the likelihood that a fighter will win the fight combined with, if they win, what is the likelihood that they end up in the optimal lineup. So an upside measurement is how I like to explain it. But let's start with the main event, the fight that everyone is waiting to see. Stipe Miocic, Daniel Cormier. Now, both these guys are in the top half of the model. That's normally a good sign for a fight, especially a main event. Now, these two fighters, they fought in twice before. It's 1-1. This will be the winner take all. And it should be a high volume fight. If we look at the first two fights between these two guys, the winner in both bouts scored over 100 DraftKings points. In fact, the last fight, even though Daniel Cormier lost, he also scored over 100 DraftKings points. He had over 100 significant strikes in 4 rounds. Pretty insane. Now, while we don't expect that to happen again, it does show the type of volume output that these guys should have. The other interesting thing that we see with this fight, we saw it in the Robert Whittaker and Darren Till fight, is that because the fight is basically a coin flip, if we look at the betting markets, Stipe's minus 106, Cormier's minus 114, as close as it gets. And because DraftKings prices their fighters based on win probability as opposed to upside, these guys are priced right in the middle. $8K for Cormier, Stipe's 8,200. FanDuel, they don't abide by this. It's not completely upside, but it is a lot more upside based than DraftKings is. And we see Stipe at $20. We see Daniel Cormier at $19, two of the highest priced fighters on the slate. So two very different pricing algorithms for this main event. Either way, if we start with DraftKings, because of their prices, their middle of the tier, middle of the pack pricing, and because of the likely volume here, we recommend 100% exposure to this fight. Whether you're making one lineup, 20 lineups, 150 lineups, get one or the other into your lineup. If you can't pick, you don't know who's going to win, just go 50-50, split it right down the middle. 50% of your lineups have Cormier, 50% of your lineups Miocic. It's up to you. The model slightly favors Miocic, and that's probably where I'll lean. But again, this will continue to update as betting market changes, as props change, odds to finish their opponent change. The Occupy model will update, and we'll see that updated here. Now, I know the stack was optimal last time, and in low-risk contests on DraftKings, you'll probably want to do that. Pretty much lock in a 100-point score in your lineup. We get that. But for your high-risk contests, your GPPs, your leagues, your satellites, no need to stack this fight, especially with so much upside we have in the other fights on the slate. On FanDuel, while it is pretty high upside, I think we can ignore these two fighters for our MVP spot, especially in high-risk contests. Now, low-risk contests, I get that too, but I still think even there are better MVP options. If you look at the round one knockout probabilities or finish probabilities, submission or KOs, there are 9 or 10 other fighters that have higher first-round KO potential than either Cormier or Miocic, and that's so important on FanDuel. You're better off going with those guys. And stick around. Later in the video, we'll talk about some of those fighters that are options as your FanDuel MVPs. If you remember some of our recent videos, we've talked about the lack of upside on various cards. Not the case this time around. This slate, we have 8 fighters with an OF index of 90 or higher. That's considered elite by our standards. 7 are above 100 in OF index. There's going to be a lot of fireworks here. There should be tons of scoring, possibly tons of finishes. Let's talk about some guys who are what I like to call fantasy point machines. And just so happens, not so coincidentally, all 3 are at the top of our model. TJ Brown, Herbert Burns, and Merab Dvalishvili. I think I got that right. Been working on my pronunciations. Let's start with TJ Brown, literally number 1 in our model. He only has 2 fights where metrics have been recorded. He was on Dana White's Contender Series, and then he had his UFC debut. And in those 2 fights, he's averaged 8.8 takedowns per 15 minutes. And that's not a fluke. This guy continuously tries to hunt takedowns, and he's pretty wild. He's got knocked out a few times. He's been submitted a few times. We saw in his UFC debut, he was winning and then randomly got submitted. So really good opportunity here against a guy, Danny Chavez, making his UFC debut. And because of his general upside, his price, his money line, TJ Brown's one of the highest upside plays on the entire slate. We can't talk about upside without talking about Dvalishvili, who an absolute takedown machine. In all 6 of his UFC fights, he's at least recorded 5 takedowns. He's gotten even better as of late. His last 2 fights, he's had 13 takedowns or more. Pretty insane. Dude's relentless. Not a very big knockout threat or finish threat, but for fantasy scoring, especially on DraftKings, he racks up the takedowns and advances. He's relentless over 15 minutes. And just go look at his DraftKings game logs. You can tell. Now, we don't get points for advances on FanDuel, so it limits his upside a bit. But we do get submission attempts. He does try a few. He still gets all the takedown attempts. He's not completely inept in the significant strike department. So either way, Dvalishvili, especially as a minus 240 favorite where the odds have moved 40 cents in his favor, is still huge upside for his price on both sides. And then finally, we have Herbert Burns, who has fought 2 UFC fights. Brother of Gilbert Burns, other UFC contender. And Burns, in both of his 2 UFC fights, has recorded quick round 1 finishes, submissions. He did come in overweight on the scales, something to keep in mind. And we'll keep an eye on how that impacts his money line throughout the night. We're recording this Friday night and all throughout Saturday afternoon. But again, has one of the highest finish percentage chances on the slate. If we sort by KO chance, that means submission, TKO, knockout. Herbert Burns actually has the highest chance of finishing this fight before it goes to the judges, 58%. Combine that with his minus 286 money line, pretty high upside, especially if he gets a chance at that 90 or 100 point bonus for a first round finish. Going back really quickly to TJ Brown and Dvalishvili, their opponents actually make for incredible FanDuel plays. If we look at, Danny Chavez against TJ Brown, we already said TJ Brown attempts a ton of takedowns. We know Dvalishvili attempts a ton of takedowns. On FanDuel, we get 5 points for every takedown defense. So if these guys are trying 10 plus takedowns and let's say they get 50%, we're getting 5 plus takedown defenses, even in a loss. Like we've seen a fighter lose against Dvalishvili on FanDuel and score 80 points. So for their prices, if we go to Danny Chavez, $13 on FanDuel. We look at John Dotson, $14 on FanDuel. These guys have pretty high floors. Assume they don't get finished immediately. They're going to get 4 or 5 plus takedown defenses, maybe some takedowns of their own. And in fact, it's kind of crazy, but both Dotson and Chavez have either near identical or higher finish potential. We already talked about Brown being reckless and has the potential to be finished. And that's where Chavez comes in. Whereas Dotson, his 20% finish number, as you see here, just a little bit higher than Diwali's 14%. So really, really, really good plays overall as underdogs, but also really good plays on FanDuel especially. Before we continue on to some FanDuel MVP options, I want to remind you one more time, join our free MMA series contest for Occupy Fantasy members. That link is in the description below. The link is here, at the top of the Occupy model. Join the DraftKings League. Winners each week will receive tickets to DraftKings opening NFL Showdown GPP. So again, it's free. Go join it. All right, speaking of FanDuel, let's talk about some FanDuel MVP options. And again, we're looking for finishes here. Absolute finishes. If we look at round 1 KO probabilities, pretty in line with the KO column here. But we have Herbert Burns, obviously 35% chance of a round 1 KO. Expect him to be popular at the MVP spot. We have Rosenstruck, who is a scary, scary man. Tons of first round finishes. 25% chance of knocking out Junior Dos Santos. And we see that with his 45% overall KO chance. Sean O'Malley, Sugar Sean, 38% chance overall, 20% chance in round 1. He's pretty expensive on both sides. And then if you're playing high risk contests on FanDuel, the big GPP, bigger leagues, let's not overlook Parker Porter and Chris Daukaus. 34% chance and 39% chance respectively. This fight has over a 70% chance of ending early. And both these guys are going to be under 10% as the MVP. Heavyweights making their UFC debut. Wide range of outcomes. Drink if you're playing that game every time I say range of outcomes. And these guys, we don't know what to expect. But heavyweights, high knockout chances. They've both knocked out or finished a bunch of people in their pre-UFC days. So definitely sneaky MVP candidates on FanDuel. All right, let's talk about some DraftKings ownership before we get out of here. If we sort by DraftKings ownership in the model, DraftKings ownership provided by MMA DFS.com. One of our members, Jake the Snake, runs that. Go check it out. Provides accurate ownership projections. We provide our own FanDuel ownership projections. And if we look at DraftKings, no surprise, we see Sean O'Malley as a minus 286 favorite, popular guy, one of the highest owned fighters projected. Cormier and Miocic near the top as well. Herbert Burns, Diwali's Wheelie, upside machines we've talked about. Rosenstruck, not a surprise. That's the names we would expect to see at the top of the DraftKings ownership leaderboard. Now, if you're playing high-risk contests on DraftKings, your goal, get no more than 3 of these guys into your lineup. And you want to save salary too. You're playing the big GPP, you're playing single entry 3 max GPPs. No more than 3 high-owned fighters, and I would say guys that are 36% or more, 35% or more projected ownership, no more than 3. Try to spend $49,000 in salary or less. Now, if you're playing smaller contests, 100-player leagues on DraftKings, smaller satellites and 10, 20, 50, 100 players, you can have up to 4, maybe even 5, depending on how much salary you're using, depending on the type of competition that is in your contest. But it's a balance. The bigger the field is, the less salary you should use, the less high-owned players that you should use. Now, on FanDuel, it's easy, right? We just don't play some of the really high-owned MVPs. We get some leverage with less than 10% guys. In that case, all we have to do is limit ourselves to 3 high-owned guys in our flex spots, and we're fine. Totally fine. We'll be unique there. The differentiation comes from the MVP spot on FanDuel. Now, low-risk contests, we don't talk about that a lot here at Occupy Fantasy, but you'll probably want to stack the main event on DraftKings to guarantee yourself a 100-point fighter. FanDuel, I really like the idea in low risk of getting both Chavez and Dotson in with their takedown defense floors, and then mix in some of the other higher money line fighters. Seems pretty straightforward to me on this slate. All right, that'll do it for this video. Hope you got a good sense of fighters to target, some underdogs you might want to look at, some projected ownership, lineup construction strategies, and we're here for you. Whether it's in the comment section below, whether it's in our Discord channel, or whether it's Saturday afternoon on Twitch, twitch.tv/Occupy Fantasy, we'll gladly answer your questions about this slate. Big slate, tons of money is out there for us to win, tons of satellite tickets for us to win. Let's go do it. And before we get out of here, click the subscribe button, please. Helps you too. You get notified of any time we release a video here on YouTube, and we'd appreciate that. So, Brian Jester, for Occupy Fantasy. Appreciate you listening. Good luck. And we'll talk to you soon.